Dr. D, Dr. D, Dr. D. Dr. D, Dr. D, Dr. D. Dr. D, Dr. D, Dr. D. Explain stuff.
Hey everyone, Dr. D here. In this video, we are going to be doing an exam review for exam 3, Biology 2421. This exam covers chapters 24, 25, 29, and 30. So let's go ahead and get started. But before I do, as always, please study all the material. Don't just go off of what this review says. I'm going to be highlighting some important points, but that's all I have time for in this review. So please study all the material. And also know any terms in bold. Please know those terms. Here we learned about the microorganisms that live on your skin that makes up your microbiome. Please know what tissues you see: skin, airway, oral cavity. You've got the gut, you've got the intestines and the colon and the small intestine, large intestine, the private areas. Please know that these are the areas where you find the microbiome. And also know where you shouldn't find microorganisms, right? That was inside of your tissues, where your blood, your lymph nodes, your organs, right? These should be free of microorganisms, and that's the job of your immune system, right? Let's see what else is very important to know. You should know that colonization begins at birth. We learned about the GI tract and how it's, rich in microorganisms, all the way from the mouth all the way to the anus. There is microorganisms along that lining. Let's see. Oh, you should know that the vast majority of all human gut phylotypes fall into one of three major bacterial phyla: Firmicutes, Bacteroidetes, and Proteobacteria. Okay. Let's see what else. Okay. Please know about the respiratory tract, the upper respiratory tract, and what kinds of microorganisms you find there. By that I mean that bacteria are continually entering the upper respiratory tract from the air. That most of them are trapped in the mucus and nasal and oral passages, and then expelled with nasal secretions, or swallowed and then killed in the stomach. Whereas in the lower respiratory tract, you should have no normal microbiota in healthy adults. Remember your mucociliary blanket I talked about in the lecture, this ciliated mucosal layer of the lungs. It helps move the particles up and out of the lungs. So again, up here you should find microorganisms, but they get flushed out of the nasal passage or down to the stomach. And then down here, the lower respiratory tract, you should really find no microorganisms thanks to our mucociliary blanket. You should know about UTI infections. That's when bacteria make their way into the urethra, which they should not be. And this is more common in females than in males. What else? You should know about microbial activities in the first year of life. Oh, variables that determine the nature of the gut microbiome. Okay, and then we explored this obesity study with mouse models. This was really interesting. Please study this concept here of the obesity study with mouse models, specifically the role of firmicutes in the obese mice. Remember that obese mice have more methanogens, a 50% reduction in bacteroidetes, and a proportional phylum-wide increase in firmicutes. Remember that obese mice had more firmicutes. And nutrient production from fermentation is higher in obese mice due to removal of hydrogen gas by methanogens. So remember, obese mice, more firmicutes, lean mice, fewer firmicutes, more bacteroidetes. That is an interesting fact. And remember, even this happens even when the mice are fed an equally caloric diet. The obese mouse obtains more nutrients from that. Remember this. So you've got the lean mouse and the obese mouse with the same diet, and the obese mouse becomes obese because it gets a fecal transplant from an obese person, an obese twin. Okay, and this was due to the higher percentage of firmicutes, I believe. Dental caries. You should know that dental caries are usually caused by streptococcus. What else? You should know about Clostridium difficile and how it's a spore former, and how it becomes how you get a Clostridium difficile after antibiotic treatment, and the therapy for Clostridium difficile is fecal transplant. Know the difference between probiotics and prebiotics. All right, so a pretty straightforward chapter there. Let's hop on to chapter 25. All right, chapter 25. Please know all these terms in bold. I'm not going to go through all of them, but obviously please know all these terms and know the importance of adherence, the ability of microbes to attach to host tissue. It is necessary but not sufficient to start disease, but it is necessary for disease. If a microbe cannot attach to you, it cannot infect you, right? And then we talked about these steps: exposure, adherence, invasion, multiplication or colonization, and then there's toxicity, invasiveness, tissue damage. We should know about adhesions. These are, things that allow the path. These are things that are found on the pathogen's surface that enable it to bind to the host cells. Adhesins. You should know about the adhesins, and they bind to receptors on the host cell. You should know about the adherence structures like capsules and why the capsules are important. Remember, they prevent phagocytosis by immune system. They also aid in attachment to host surfaces. You should know about the other adherence structures: fimbriae, pili, flagella. Know the importance of colonization. If the bacteria cannot colonize on the host, then they can't cause an infection. So yeah, these are the steps you should know: loose association, adhesion, followed by colonization. All of these are required for infection. Dental caries. Remember, we talked about dental caries in chapter 24. You should know that dental caries, also known as cavities, are caused by streptococcus. So the big one is Streptococcus mutans, which is really known for cavities, but also Streptococcus subreninus is known for dental caries as well. Then you've got your plaques that form. Please know these terms. Know the term virulence. And remember, anything that helps a microorganism to cause disease is called a virulence factor. Understand lethal dose 50, the amount of agent that kills 50% of animals, or amount of the microbe that kills 50% of animals. Know that highly virulent pathogens show little difference in the number of cells required to kill 100% of the population as compared to 50%. So know that fact. Let's see. Know these terms. Know what a pathogenicity island is. Let's see. Know the term nosocomial infection. Know the term opportunistic infection. Know the importance of invasiveness. This is another step to pathogenicity. Know about these tissue-destroying enzymes. Obviously, know the terms toxicity, exotoxins. Let's see, what else? Know these terms. All right. Oh, you should know the mechanism of action of botulinum toxin versus tetanus toxin. So what is botulinum toxin doing here? And how is it working to dull the muscle contraction? And what is tetanus toxin doing that's triggering muscle contraction? So the mechanism of action of botulinum toxin versus here tetanus. Then we talked about enterotoxins, hemolysis, superantigens. Again, any term in bold, please know the terms in bold. You should definitely know for the exam endotoxin, and you should know that endotoxin means the lipid A, the lipid portion of LPS. You should know that for sure. And you should definitely know this for the exam, the difference between endotoxins and exotoxins. So endotoxins are resistant to heat, which means heat stable, whereas endotoxins are resistant to heat stable, whereas exotoxins are susceptible to heat labile. Endotoxin is lipid A from gram-negative cell walls versus exotoxins are protein toxins. Endotoxins are weakly immunogenic. That means weakly triggered the immune system. Exotoxins are highly immunogenic. That's a 100% important thing to know, this slide here. Awesome. So with that, let's go on to chapter 29. All right, chapter 29, epidemiology. Again, please know all the terms in bold. The difference between incidence and prevalence is important for the exam. The difference between an epidemic, a pandemic, and an endemic is important for the exam. All of these terms in bold, please know the difference between a chronic infection and an acute infection. Know the stages of a disease: infection, incubation, acute, decline, and convalescence. And you should know that during incubation, it's difficult to, diagnose the disease correctly. It's not until acute period that you can diagnose the disease. Know the difference between mortality and morbidity. Know the concept of herd immunity. Please know this concept is very important. Herd immunity. How does herd immunity work, and how does it help the herd? How does the herd being immune, how does that help individuals who cannot be vaccinated? So let's say these people B, person B and person C, how are they being helped? Let's say they are immunocompromised or they are too young to be vaccinated. You see how the herd can help prevent them from becoming sick. So be able to explain how herd immunity works and how that helps protect people in the population who cannot be vaccinated. Then we talked about direct versus indirect modes of disease transmission. This is a big one to know for the exam. What is a reservoir? You should know that, what a reservoir is. So you should know, remember, non-living reservoirs versus living reservoirs. You should know the term zoonoses. The difference between a common source epidemic and a host-to-host epidemic. What is a carrier? And that's it. Very straightforward chapter, actually. Just a bunch of terms for the most part. But please know the concept of herd immunity and how that helps susceptible people in the population. Especially in the current climate, right, with the pandemic going on. Definitely understand the importance of herd immunity. All right, and the last chapter, chapter 30. Let's do it. So please understand the airborne pathogens, the difference between regular droplets and droplet nuclei. Please understand the parts of the upper respiratory tract versus the lower respiratory tract. Know about Streptococcus pyogenes. You should know that Streptococcus pyogenes is the causative agent of strep throat. You should know that Streptococcus pyogenes can also cause systemic infections such as cellulitis and necrotizing fasciitis. You should know about diphtheria and that it's a airborne disease and caused by Corynebacterium diphtheriae. You should know about pertussis or whooping cough, and you should know that it's caused by Bordetella pertussis and it's an airborne disease. You should know about Mycobacterium tuberculosis and leprosy, Hansen's disease caused by Mycobacterium leprae. And you should know that these are acid-fast bacterium because they have mycolic acids, and these are airborne disease. Let's see. You should know about meningitis. And you should know that there's no one causative agent for meningitis. You should also know that there's no one causative agent for pneumonia. You should know about Neisseria meningitidis, causes meningitis. You should know about these airborne viral diseases. You should know that viruses are less easily controlled by chemotherapeutic methods. You should know that most viral disease are acute and self-limiting. Measles. You should know about measles, and it's a respiratory disease that spreads very easily. You should know about rubella, which is a respiratory disease that also spreads fairly easily. Mumps, another respiratory disease. All right, chickenpox. We should know about chickenpox, which is caused by varicella zoster virus, and you should know that chickenpox can re-emerge as shingles. We should know about colds, and specifically with the colds, you should know that they're caused by rhinoviruses mainly, but they're also caused by coronaviruses, and 10% are even due to other viruses. So there's a host of different viruses, not a single virus, but many different viruses that cause the common cold. You should know about hemagglutinin and neuraminidase, which are spike proteins of the flu, So we talked about the flu. You should know about the flu. And influenza A, you should know that influenza A is the most important human pathogen. And you should know that H1N1, you know, the H's and the N's of the flu names have to do with hemagglutinin, and neuraminidase. You should know this. You should know about the flu, and you should understand how flu outbreaks occur annually, and there's different strains of the flu. Why? You should know because antigenic drift causes, you know, it's due to antigenic drift, which is caused by mutation because it's an RNA virus. And you should know there's also antigenic shift because of reassortment of the segmented genome. Remember in lecture I mentioned that there is a segmented genome. You have 8 different pieces of genomic RNA in a flu virus, and these 8 pieces can get shuffled around to give you new arrangements. Well, that's antigenic shift. So you should be able to talk about the flu. Why do you need a new flu shot every year? What's the difference between antigenic drift, which is based on mutations, versus antigenic shift, which is based on reassortment of the segmented genome of the flu virus? And then we talked about staphylococcus. You should know the term pyogenic. That means pus forming. You should know Helicobacter pylori, and you should know that it causes the gastric ulcers, gastritis, and even gastric cancer. You should know about hepatitis, and you should know about hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis D. And you should know that hepatitis D isn't a true virus. It is a virusoid, which means it is a piece of RNA, and it piggybacks inside of hepatitis B. So you should know that hepatitis D is not a complete virus. And then there's hepatitis C and hepatitis E. Please know about those. Ebola, you should know about Ebola and how it spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids and the precautions to take. You have to have full PPE. Then we talked about STIs or STDs. Please know the difference between gonorrhea and syphilis. Which one is commonly asymptomatic in women? Gonorrhea is commonly asymptomatic in women. Gonorrhea is caused by Neisseria gonorrhoeae. And you should know, again, that it's commonly asymptomatic in females, whereas highly painful in males. You should know about syphilis is caused by Treponema pallidum. You should know that. And you should know about primary, secondary, and tertiary syphilis. Remember, primary syphilis, you have the chancre sore, followed by secondary syphilis with the body rash. And only during primary and secondary syphilis is penicillin a effective treatment. However, in tertiary syphilis, this is when penicillin is no longer an effective treatment because the tertiary, the gumas that form and the damage that's being done is due to the immune system and not due to the bacteria. We should know about chlamydia trachomatis. We talked about herpes simplex virus 1. This one causes cold sores or fever blisters. And herpes simplex virus 2, this one causes painful blisters on the penis of the male and cervix, vulva, and vagina of females. We should know about HPV, human papillomavirus. Many infections are asymptomatic. Some can progress to genital warts or cervical cancer. And we should know about HIV, then how that can lead to AIDS. And know a little bit about the mechanism of HIV infection of cells. So you have, remember, the GP120, GP41 spike proteins, and they recognize the CCR5 and CD4 receptors on the surface of the target cell, on macrophages and on top of helper T cells. All right, I think that's about it. We covered some of the important points. Overall, a very straightforward exam. Not too much challenging material on there. I think you'll do really well just by knowing the concepts on these slides. I tried to highlight some of the more important points for you, and I think you should be good. Make sure you study all the material, though, to be extra set for the exam. I know you can do it. I wish you good luck, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Dr. D, Dr. D, Dr. D. 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 Dr. D, Dr. D, Dr. D.